now going to introduce the moderator for the next panel. The title of this panel is Trauma-Informed Approaches to Criminal Legal Practice, and it's being moderated by Khalil Cumberbatch, who is the Director of Strategic Partnerships at the Council on Criminal Justice, and we're very happy to have the Council on Criminal Justice as one of our summit partners as well. And I have a very impressive bio for Khalil, but he's telling me not to read it. So, I don't know Khalil well, but we've been in the same circle of formerly incarcerated advocates for many years, and I just want to say that I respect your work immensely as a colleague and hope to become a friend as well. Thank you. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Chris. What an impressive introduction. And I've always found that about 4 words into anyone reading a bio, you just sign out. Like, you're just like a great person. So thank you, Chris, for that. And similarly, want to obviously acknowledge your role in planning this event and getting one here, Hannah as well, and your staff. Congratulations on an amazing summit. And thank you for the invite to be a moderator amongst esteemed colleagues. And I'm really just not going to talk a lot about me. I really want to get to the panelists and hear their thoughts on the issue. But obviously we're all here because we know how important the issue is. We know that the attention to trauma within the criminal justice system is an issue that has had heightened attention, maybe not as much as some of us would like, but it has had more attention over the last 10 or 15 years or so. Obviously, we'll hear more from the experts on the panel, but I really wanted to thank everyone for joining us for this very important conversation. As mentioned, my name is Khalil Cumberbatch. I am the Director of Strategic Partnerships at an organization called the Council on Criminal Justice. We are a policy think tank, individual membership organization, and we try to focus on policy recommendations for important issues facing the criminal justice system. So if anyone's interested in our work, love to speak to you afterwards. But without further ado, we're going to get to our panelists, and we're going to be started off by Judge Dunn.
Thanks, Khalil. When I was thinking about what I wanted to say to you today, I'm approaching it from the topic we have, trauma-informed approaches to criminal legal practice. And I think when I started in the criminal justice system 30 years ago, I've been a judge for 27, this was spoken about. You know, when I first became a judge, I was trying to be an efficient docket manager, move my caseload, give everybody a fair trial, apply due process, and then dispose of the cases as efficiently as I could. When I became the judge of the first mental health court in New York State, obviously that dissipated, right? Here I am, all of a sudden, I have a clinical team of social workers. I read psychosocial reports, psychiatric reports, and so the job in my thinking over these years is the court started in 2002, so it's been 21 years, has certainly evolved in great ways. And in talking about trauma, now I'll go into a little bit, a couple of minute explanation of the mental health code I have in Brooklyn and how it works, the nuts and bolts, but if I were to tell you the story of a person who was referred to the court, and in reading the psychosocial report, I'm reading about a terrified 6-year-old hiding in a closet listening to the murder of her mother and a drug deal gone bad. She came to the court charged with her abusive boyfriend of armed robbery, New York State robbery in the first degree, to be diverted from jail or prison to treatment and hope. Her boyfriend wound up going to trial, was convicted, and started the sentence to stay in prison. This young woman, not only because of the trauma I just read about, but that she was suffering from major depressive disorder, which you can certainly understand. And you can also understand that her experience in listening to the murder of her mother at 6 years old was something that overdetermined her life. And here she was before me, and what's going to happen? Well, was able to get her into the court. She wound up graduating from the court, got a dismissal of her charges, actually. I mean, the question was asked yesterday in one of the panels, can we safely divert violent criminals from prison into the criminal justice system? And I'm going to explain that a little bit in explaining how the court works and what it does. So the court was planned, opened 21 years ago or so, and it was planned as a non-violent felony court for adults. The reason that the Office of Court Administration in New York wanted you to take non-violent felonies is the fear that, if something happened and somebody that committed a violent felony was released into the community and did something terribly wrong to some innocent person, that would be the end of not only the Brooklyn Mental Health Court, but mental health courts in New York State. But one of the first cases referred to us was a case of a young woman who murdered her infant at the moment of birth. Now, that was not a particular case that the mental health court handled, but right after that, a young man was referred to the court, early 20s. He committed 2 street robberies, considered violent crimes, and when he was on Rikers Island, it was determined that he was his first psychotic break, suffering from paranoid schizophrenia, and the case was referred to the mental health court. And then we made a determination that if we wanted to do what we hoped to do, we were going to have to take these cases. So much so that, as I sit here today, of the 300 cases in the mental health court, at least half involve people accused or have pled guilty to a violent crime. So what happened? So let's take the case of this young man. Case is referred to the court, and first thing that happens, the defendant comes into the mental health court, greeted by me and a social worker that's on the clinical team of the mental health court. I'm lucky enough that I have a project and clinical director who's a licensed certified social worker, a couple of social workers and case management people on the staff, so that allows us to take on more cases that we would be able to do without that kind of clinical support. So he comes into the court, talks to the social worker. Immediately we schedule a meeting with one of the social workers on the court staff. They'll do a psychosocial report, and we pay a psychiatrist to do psychiatric reports. And basically the eligibility requirement is that the person has a serious and persistent mental illness. Certainly you can have a co-occurring disorder, you can have a secondary diagnosis of personality disorder. That won't disqualify anybody. So as I said, this young man was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. He came into the court after the eligibility was determined by the social worker and the psychiatrist, and the mandate period for a first felony offender is 12 to 18 months. The reason for that is when the court was planned, the defense attorneys did not want an open-ended mandate. Not that anybody feels anybody's cured after a year and a half, but we hope that the good habits of staying in treatment on medication will take hold, and the bad habits of criminal behavior, criminal relationships will end. In the case of this young man, he had great family support. He was studying graphic design at Pratt Institute in Brooklyn. He was the first member of his family to go to college. And I will say his father came to see him came with him to court every week, because I like to see the defendants once a week for the first 3 months, pretty much as and again goes back to the question of safely diverting violent criminals. The reason is that it allows correction immediately if something's going on. Going to the program, not staying on medication. And this young man did very well. So after a year, being eligible, graduated from the court. In this case, because we were talking about 2 violent felonies, the district attorney's office wanted a period of probation, but the felony would be reduced to a misdemeanor. His mother wrote to the district attorney at the time and to me asking for a complete dismissal, and I think to the district attorney's credit, he agreed that the case would be dismissed if he stayed another 6 months. And that's exactly what happened. So again, the way it works, we do the evaluations, the district attorney and the defense attorney work out a plea, because a plea is pretty much required for the admissibility of the court, not always. and then a jail term or prison term is agreed to up front in the event of failure, and hopefully a complete dismissal, but at least a non-jail disposition at the end of it, so we can avoid people having hurt them from prison or jail. And I will say that I've been through 3 district attorneys during the time that this court has been open, and the district attorney now, Eric Gonzalez, and I think this is right, said that in Brooklyn, New York, the default is diversion. If we can safely keep people out of jail, then we'll do that. Jail will be the last option. And I will say that we don't have a hair trigger, that people, unless I feel that public safety has been seriously jeopardized, many chances as it takes. One other point. Well, another point about the trauma. I just got a psychiatric report, a 27-year-old young man charged with burglary, life full of trauma, raised in a household with physical abuse, alcohol and drugs at a young age. He spent 5 years in prison, and according to the report, suffers not only from major depressive disorder, but traumatic stress disorder, and a psychiatrist wrote, has trauma-related symptoms including flashbacks, nightmares, hypervigilance from repeated physical abuse. In prison, causing self-medication as well. So I'm kind of giving you these because there is into the mental health court that we hope, and we can help. And we've had over 1,400 graduates. I don't only say it's the individuals, but their families as well that are graduating from the court. And we have shown to reduce recidivism. We do have people coming in. We don't penalize them for being rearrested, coming back into the system. And the last point I want to make is it talks about trauma-informed approaches to criminal practice. I will say that as a judge in this type of court, as opposed to traditional criminal court, and it goes for the lawyers to practice it, right? So you need a certain amount of specialized knowledge. I mean, we're not mental health professionals, but we do need to learn about it. Of course, every assessment has to be individual, has to be geared towards who is this person? There's an evolving legal framework. Some jurisdictions are more conservative than others. So what will the community bear? Will they bear releasing violent criminals in the community? I mean, I've been doing this over 20 years, and so that legal framework has evolved from nonviolent felony court. Wouldn't take young people, now we take everybody. We got a grant from the Justice Department. People with developmental disabilities, like intellectual developmental disabilities, autism, and so we take those cases as well. Again, balancing rehabilitation and public safety, and I'd say finally, and Judge Aiken can talk to this too, judicial compassion and empathy. And for defense lawyers in these courts, close over the prosecutors as well. Again, specialized knowledge. I think it's important for lawyers to begin the conversation about diversion as soon as possible in the process. And one of the things I didn't mention is cases I've been talking to you about. The defense lawyers have prepared, had mental health professionals prepare pre-pleading. It's assigned to the case to say, hey, look, this person is willing to take a look at it. And again, it wasn't this way when I started on the bench 27 years ago, but certainly the collaboration between specialists in substance use disorder, mental health professionals, and the attorneys on the court have been something that I think has been to justice courts in New York State.
Thank you, Judge, for sharing important and critical viewpoints from the bench, but also as a pioneer. If anyone wants to learn more about the speakers on this panel, generally any of the speakers at the conference. Know that there's a way to download the app on documents, some material outside. You can also find some titles and names in the back of the program. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on bios here. I think that's important to read as panelists that we do want to save as much time as possible for questions. So we will get there. We'll try to save as much time as possible. So next, we'll pass it to.
Hi everybody, thank you. My name is Kristy Laschober, and it's really good to be here. I feel like kind of the weight and responsibility of changing hearts. So I hope I change somebody's heart here with my truth. But oftentimes I'm in a space preaching or talking about advocacy and change and what goes on in prison and the atrocities of being inside to the people that have already done it. So it's kind of like preaching to the choir. So it feels really good to have the opportunity to speak to people that have not been in prison, that maybe sentence people to prison, just so I can explain a little bit just what goes on and what kind of person goes to prison. Because before I went to prison, I had an idea about what people in prison were like, and after going to prison, I had a completely different change of view. And so, I'm glad that there's a lot of kind, compassionate people here listening. And when I listened to the keynote yesterday, it was actually quite soothing to hear her talk about trauma, because then it really it makes a lot of times I now understand like why I made some of the bad decisions that I made, and that it's not that I'm an awful, terrible person. Sometimes from trauma, like they talk about having fear and constant stress equals trauma. And, a lot of times we never really talked about that. And so when I was 27 years old, I had a hysterectomy, and I've always wanted to have kids. And when I was done with the operation, I had really kind of disconnected from myself, and I didn't really address what was going on, like I couldn't have kids anymore. And so a doctor came to me afterward, and she was helping my doctor, and she said, I just wanted to meet you. Someone that had been through so much. I just wanted to see who this young lady was. And I immediately said, I haven't been through that much. And then when I said it, I thought, that's kind of stupid. Why did I just say that? Because I had been through a lot, but I always, I never wanted to really kind of talk about that. And she was right. I had been through stuff. And so, and I write about that in my book, being in denial was survival. So, a lot of times, you just do what you do as you get through. And I've had a lot of surgeries. I've had 40 operations from a child, from birth. At the time they used to call them birth defects. And so immediately after I was born, you have surgeries and you have pain medication. And so that's pretty much how I learned to live my life, and how I learned to deal with emotions through lots of Demerol and Dilaudid and morphine, and in the hospital, Children's Hospital of Orange County. That was like my second home. And so I had a loving family. I still do, a wonderful father and mother. And when I was 13, I went to New York, and there was they were doing a trial for kidneys. And so I was excited just to go to New York. I wasn't even thinking, you don't really think about what's going to happen, just that you get to go to New York. And so my mom got them to allow her to let me out in the daytime so we could go shopping. And so she brought a Macy's bag with her, and she's like, I know we have to do this urine sample, but we'll carry it in this Macy's bag, and I'll make sure she takes her medication and does all the things. And so, and I'm just saying that because my family really tried to make it normal, so we're going to do this. So it's, when I look back, it's like a lot of contrast of pain and support at the same time. And I remember being in an elevator going up the stairs, and I see all the buttons of how many floors there are. And in California, we have 2 floors, in Broadway or whatever. We didn't even have a Macy's there, and I was so excited about that. So we shopped all day, and at one point I'm like, Mom, Macy's bag. And so we like looked for about another hour to look for big container of urine that I was supposed to keep that she promised that the doctors would allow me to be out. So we looked for an hour. Finally, we found it in the dressing room. And again, I'm saying all that because it's like, you know, I had a loving family. I had a lot of opportunity, but there was a lot of denial. And that's kind of the first time, you know, I know the doctor has said to my mom, you know, Kristy has a lot of denial. And she didn't understand what that meant because she just wanted me to be, you know, a regular kid. So my father was the first face I'd see every morning. He would look at me, you know, the minute I would wake up, and he would say, "How are you feeling? Do you feel okay, Kristy?" And I'm like, the only answer was, "Yes, I feel, Dad, I'm good." You know, and so I learned that how I felt didn't matter. And so again, through all this time, I was getting Demerol, morphine, Dilaudid, working, going to school. That was my life. Taking, you know, three months out of the hospital, 3 months in. That's what, you know, the life. And so I ended up stopping doing all drugs when I wasn't in the hospital. As I got older, I got married, and at one point there was a bunch of chain of events for divorce and father dying and adoption that fell through, and I didn't know how to handle it emotion-wise. And so when I went in the hospital, they said, "I'll get you a shot," and I thought, oh, you know, I don't need it, Kristy. You don't need that shot. But the thought of having a little bit of relief was like, but I deserve some relief. I just want a little bit of relief. And so I said yes, and I knew when I took that shot, I knew that was not good, that I was going to go back in you know, the addiction mode that I had been in. And so that fueled the fire of meeting a man who had relapsed, and I tried drugs, I tried methamphetamine, we sold drugs to a priest. I got caught and I went to federal prison. And so when I was sentenced, the judge said to me, he said, "You will be at a camp in California." I had never been in trouble before. And so this was a whole new world that opened up to me. And so he said, "You'll be at a camp in California. You'll do RDAP, so you'll only get 3 years in prison. And then you'll go home." And so none of those things happened for me. My mom was ready to meet me in the camp in California. But when I was in the Oklahoma Transition Center, you know, I woke up and I saw that it was light out, and I knew we were supposed to leave at 4 a.m. But they said, "Laschober, you're going to Texas." And I thought, Texas? Why am I going to Texas? And you know, I had researched any prisons in Texas, so I told my mom, "Look at Carswell." And so when she wrote me back, she still was crying. She goes, "They call it that hospital of horrors, Kristy." And so this is a mom who like tried, you know, my whole life to keep me alive, and she's like, "Now I'm going to the hospital of horrors." And so I went, I applied for RDAP, and I got in, and I got kicked out after, I don't know how many months I was in there, for speaking to my old bunkie who was the known compound drug dealer. And so someone told on me, because that's what you do in RDAP, and I got kicked out. I tried to apply later, which took a while. So, you know, there's so many stories that I could go on and on about prison, and, you know, there's lots of stories about that, but I kind of just want to talk more about why someone like me goes to prison, why a lot of people go to prison. I told my mom when I first got to Carswell, after hearing stories of all the people in there, I said, "Mom, this is a trauma hospital. This is just what this is. Like, there's story after story, and no one like complaining really about I shouldn't be here. It's like, this is just my life." And so I heard story after story after story. And so, of course, because I had opportunity, I felt a little faint, like, why am I here? I still didn't really understand the trauma of everything. You know, and so I got back in RDAP, long story, how I tried to go to another prison because everyone was telling me, "Kristy, in Carswell, they don't graduate anybody. You're not going to be able to graduate." And I said, "Well, I'll graduate. You know, I don't do drugs. I'm not going to have sex. all be able to graduate. And so, but they were right. And right before I was supposed to go home, there was 32 of us in the program, and everybody quit or got kicked out except 2 of us. And so I cannot understand why people would quit when you would get a year off. Like, you should stay in and do it no matter what. But after talking to some of my friends that are here that have been inside, they said, it was so much more traumatic being inside and being an RDAP and trying to deal with your traumas, that they would rather quit and do another year just because you can't deal with trauma when you're inside and you're in survival mode, fight or flight mode. And so I got kicked out. They said I was inauthentic, and they said that the lady who's in charge of RDAP, she said to me, she said, "Thank God you couldn't have children, Kristy." She said, "You would have been a terrible mother. I bet you're a terrible daughter and a terrible sister." So when we talk about trauma prior, and then trauma inside, this is not abnormal. This is not an anomaly. This is what happens inside, like time and time again. It's just, berating and inhumane and, trauma up a trauma. And so, that was probably the first time in my life, I know it was, that I felt like maybe it's better if I'm not on this planet, because something must be wrong with me. I'm in a drug program, I get kicked out. First of all, I'm in prison. What the hell am I doing in prison? And then I'm in a drug program, I got kicked out, and the lady who, seemed like a decent lady was telling me, thank God I couldn't have children. And so I went to my landscape boss, who never spoke a lot, and he said, "Laschober, just put your head down, work, get out of here, and don't come back." And so I started to write a lot while I was in there, just to try to figure out who I am, what am I doing here, why am I getting kicked out, why am I inauthentic? I didn't even know what authenticity meant at that time. And so in writing, it was really just to discover about myself. So that's kind of where I started the process with trying to learn all that. And I want to emphasize too with the reentry prior to coming out. In Carswell, it's a maximum security prison. Most of the women in there have been in there a long time. It was a supposed hospital medical center. That's why they sent me there. And the reentry classes consisted of lining up every month, and either no one showed up, or they didn't bother having a class. But they did one class, and you would walk in and you'd sign, and they say, sign here. And you say, well, what am I signing? They said, this is AIDS prevention class. Don't have unprotected sex. Now sign here. Don't sit down. This is not, it's not really a class. And you would sign, and then you would leave. And that was the whole extent of reentry, which it goes back to what we heard yesterday about mattering. That's just a reiteration of you don't matter. There's nothing about you that matters. That was the continual underlying message. Make sure I have my hat. So I got out, and I relocated to Oregon, because the guy that I had gone to prison with got out early because he graduated with RDAP with flying colors, but he couldn't stay sober once he got out. And so I went to Oregon, and I was told that I needed to that it would be in my best interest to go to reentry court, and I would get a year off. And I was like, I heard that before. I don't know how much I believe that, but I thought, why not? I'm going to go try it. And so I went, and I was blown away about what I heard and what I saw. And this is with Judge Aiken's reentry court, which I'll kind of explain what it looks like. So it's a room, just like a regular room in the probation office, which I didn't know was a probation office at that time. It just seemed like an office. And around the table, there are those of us who've gotten out of federal prison. And then there was, the judge, sometimes a guest judge, prosecutors, police officers, counselors, defense attorneys. And so they would, treatment people, and they would say, so how was your month? And she would allow everybody to talk as long as they wanted. about how their month was. And at the same time, she would be on her computer. What do you need? And so she would make calls, make connections constantly. And the first time I saw her, I was like, this is weird. Like, it made me very emotional. Like, wow, like you go from a family that loves you to, someone telling you, thank God you couldn't have children and you don't matter, to someone who then is loving you again. It's a very surreal experience. And so it was once a month for a year. And that's what she would do. That Friday, she would just let everyone talk. And sometimes it was childcare, sometimes it was, driver's license, anger management, all sorts of things. And so she would be in solution the whole day, and which was great. I mean, I had a little hard time with survivor's guilt, thinking that I should be helping this person, that I had spent a lot of time with prior to prison. And so that kind of started the message of sharing honestly, having it be received, and having solution, which is great. And so, she was said to me, why aren't you in college? And I said, I don't know, I'm kind of old, I'm getting too old, I don't know what I want to do. And, I didn't know her at the time, so I didn't know what the response would be, like 20 minutes of like why I'm not too old and what I need to do. And so, because like what Chris said yesterday, instead of saying all the things you can't do, say what you can do. And so she was always presented all the options of what you can do. And so I just kept saying yes to everything. And I went back to college. I had my first test. I'll never forget the most amazing experience of my life getting out of prison was taking my first math test after 30 years not being in school and getting 100%. I started bawling. It's still my most emotional moment because the message I got from that is like, wow, what else am I capable of? I was so excited to know what else there was. And I knew I had someone like Ann next to me to remind me what I'm capable of. And even if I would go this far, she would pull me further. And so I also just want to highlight, one of the things about being incarcerated is when you get out, there are amazing people that have been incarcerated that are doing the work. That, I know we're talking about trauma and mental health court and all that, which is fabulous, but if we're not doing that, there's people that are doing that, and that's us that have been in prison. And so those of you that have been in prison that are okay with that, I'd love for you to stand up so we can applaud you and so I can say thank you. That is so amazing. I love you guys. I'm so honored about the wealth of information and talent and just innovation that everybody has. I mean, I can go on and on, but I just want to say thank you to you guys. I was going to use the white blackboard. I just want to do one thing really quick. So what I do now, I help people, women especially that are incarcerated, see opportunities. Because I know that there are so many opportunities for those inside, and they don't see it. Most of the time, we talk about second chances. I'm talking about first chance most of the time. And so here's what I do that's super simple that really changes mine.
So I just say to everybody, like, here's your life, here's what you've been living, your family, here's your friends.
Can everyone hear her?
Yes.
Okay.
And so I just like point you here, here's your friends, your family, this is your, gang, this is your, sister, whatever, right here. And so I said, okay, so maybe you come out here a little bit and then you start to live a new life here. And you see some possibilities. But then I said, but then you have all this whole world here. And people that want to help you, that want to see you succeed, that all these opportunities and careers and stuff that you can do, but nobody really points them in this direction. So my favorite thing is to have a girl who says, hey, Kristy, I signed up for school. She's so excited because I'm trying to get her to be in school. And then I said, well, what do you do? She said, I'm going to be a drug and alcohol counselor. I said, great. Well, what if you could do anything? What if money were no object, you could do anything? And she's almost embarrassed to say, think I'd be a really good family attorney. I said, let's do it. So then we made all this stuff up. Now she's in law school. So it's like the opportunity, that's what if I could just have one thing, if anyone could just have one person that they present opportunity and mentorship to, it would change the world one by one by one.
Thank you, Kristy. Judge Aiken, you have a hard act to follow. I just want to point out some housekeeping stuff real quick. So we're going to end here at 2:50, right? We're going to try to start questions around 2:25-ish. At the latest 2:30.
I always love aspirational goals.
Yes, completely aspirational.
They're all aspirational.
Thank you. So, Judge, take it away.
First of all, I'm here to accompany Kristy, who really is such a humble person and didn't even begin to tell you all that she's accomplished. She came back in Oregon single-handedly banned the box for applications for universities. We worked together with Gunnar Johnson up in the back. We've worked with another friend of ours, Randy Shaw, for the last 2 years trying to replicate a program in Oregon called Project Rebound or Redeeming Scholars, or a number of names taking the program from California that's been ingrained for close to 40 years and is in the governor's budget, and moving it to Oregon to have a network of navigators going into the prison and then bringing people out of prison so that they're already ready to go to college or trade school or community college. Kristy's been a leader in that. I want to start by thanking the Center for Justice and Human Dignity, period, for just bringing people with hearts together to share and to talk, because this work is so hard and is frankly heartbreaking to me that there's got to be a better sense of passion and urgency. Thank God Judge Reeves spoke today, because I really needed that injection and truth speaking today. I have so many ways I want to approach this, but Dr. Alicia Moreland-Kapuya was from Oregon, and I had the privilege of working with her when she was still finishing her degrees and putting together her trauma-informed work. She's remarkable, and that set the stage, and frankly, I was insistent that we have to do a better job. I think it's a legal and medical malpractice that lawyers and judges do not have the kind of training that she provides on any level, and so I'm going to shotgun a number of things. Our reentry court in Oregon, I like to say that Judge Sifton in New York had the first one, because I'm a little house on the prairie, it's Oregon, nobody pays any attention to us. So Judge Sifton had a little court that he ran with reentry to begin with. He was a colleague of Jack Weinstein's, and Judge Weinstein heard us present the first time when we were in Huntington Beach. Mark Sherman's up there, our first presentation on reentry, and Jack was so excited he ran back to tell Judge Sifton all about the program. He goes, "For God's sakes, we have this program. I've been doing it here in New York. I just don't tell anybody." And so a lot of this work has been done underground. I had judges in Georgia who came to me and said, "We've been quietly doing this work." Well, it's time we come up and out, because we're failing in this country. We are locking up people. We are taking people's educations away from them. Our kids are not going to have opportunities down the road, and we're over and over again using incarceration as a tool for power and control. And these are the issues that we're facing are complex, and we've yet to really address the issues, and it goes back to trauma-informed work. So I want to tell you, my work began, and I'm an oddity on the federal bench, because my work began working with children and families in a medical model. And I was a state court judge for 10 years before, and family court judge 10 years before that, and was recruited to go to the federal bench because I can tell you honestly, it started sentencing people in the state court, and their parents would bring the kids to court and they'd hit their kids. And I go, okay, time, wait a minute, we don't do that. And we started understanding you had to break the cycles of abuse and neglect in families. Started addressing those issues, and I became intricately involved, and I've been on the board of the Relief Nursery, early intervention for programs for children of abuse and neglect and families before they end up in the system. So that if people are struggling in families, they can go to therapeutic preschool. We've been building infrastructure of services for kids of abuse and neglect across Oregon. That's my free time. My day job is repairing damaged adults. That's what sentencing and our work is about. But my free time is, can we just break the cycle and the flow of trauma, kids who have been traumatized early on, right into the pipeline for prisons. If you read any pre-sentence report, 99% of them start with child abuse, neglect, maltreatment, all sorts of family dysfunction, starts right back here, and we wait till we have the most expensive alternative, a federal prison bed, to really do an intervention, and then we mess it up because the trauma that happens in the prisons, it's so difficult to overcome. My heart is with all the people who stood up. You know, I would just sooner listen to you all day long to give us more information about what we can do better, because that's where I really learned. So we had a conference years ago, probably now 20 years ago, and exactly 20 years ago, and we decided, Steve Wax, who's the public defender, said, let's have a drug court. And they said, well, we can't have a drug court because the prosecutors won't let us do that. And we said, no, it can be at the back end because the judges control that. I was like, oh yeah, this works. So what's ironic is they spent a year writing the MOU because they had to fight over sanctions. And I was sitting there laughing because sanctions don't do anything. Sanctions are just accountability measures. What really works are incentives. So I'm going to tell you honestly, all of this is about incentives. It's all about asking what people need, what's the problem, and listening. We do so little listening to what people really need that what I want you to know, in working with trauma-informed models, I've had a trauma-informed therapist at my table to help us understand how to interpret as this is emerging in the field. And the hallmarks are safety, creating a safe space. So our reentry court is a safe place for people to talk. We don't hurt people in there. What we do is we problem solve and we address issues. Choice, giving people choices, not just ordering them to do things or saying these are your 3 things, but having them help us decide what they want to do. Trustworthiness. When I'm in the reentry room, I don't wear a robe. I roll up my sleeves, I sit anywhere. We all sit around the table together. we're all just people around the table, and they all know when I'm in that room, I'm there to help. Period. You're there to help, not going to do anything else. And they have to watch that. When you come out of prison, and the level of skepticism is so great that, watch for a while and see what you can quietly tell me that you can open up and talk to them about. Collaboration. I work with any partner in the community that can get me services that are individualized and targeted towards the evidence-based need of that person. I don't send people to cookie cutter stuff, or I don't just set up, everybody's going to go to this. We figure out what that person needs strategically, and we offer it. In other words, I really love the phrase yesterday, until people are willing to talk to me, I'll sit with them in the darkness. We'll sit there as long as we need to until somebody has a level of trust and they'll say, they'll lay something out there, and you'll go, I think it means this, and then you start that conversation, and you're just wanting somebody to just listen. I'm a huge believer and reading widely. In this book, I schlepped it all the way back. I buy it and give it away all the time. Maybe it doesn't have it, I'm happy to give it to you, and I don't have to take it back. The Body Keeps the Score. I've had so many people in prison read this book because you can explain to many people all you want about how trauma affects things, but when they start to read about really the trauma that's happened in lives, and it's not just them, it's happening exponentially in child abuse and neglect. This was by a physician, 30-year study of children. He started out with Vietnam vets and what the trauma was doing to the Vietnam vets, and then he saw the trauma in his own neighborhoods in Children's Hospital in Boston. He studied what trauma did to children. And so it talks about the way in which you react with post-traumatic stress disorder, where you could be disassociated, and both are effects of trauma. And it's cumulative, on top, and the reactions are easy to start unraveling if you understand what you're doing. So having a trauma-informed therapist at the table has mattered. I use a lot of incentives. Education is huge. I've had an education specialist at my table for years. She comes and works for free. She evaluates all their skill sets, and then we figure out how to get people the opportunities to go into either a community college or to a four-year institution or a trade school so they can improve and take care of their families. The lessons that I have really understood is one of the things about the system, and I just want to scream, is what our system, when people make a mistake, we take stuff away from them. And what we learned in reentry is when people make a mistake, so they're in reentry and they use. They don't know why they use, but they used. The thing is, what we do is we start asking questions, why? The system never asks why. We ask why. And they don't even know. So maybe they use and they can't figure out. We ask all around, what were you doing? And it's always trauma. There's always some trauma, and the only way they could cope with their feelings was to use, because that's all they knew. And so we start deconstructing how people react to using trauma. and using those experiences. And it's ironic because what we've concluded is in the system when these kind of issues come about, we should up support 20% or more. We should up support, not take it away. And so we have to come at this entire system using the Law, Brain, and Behavior Center from Harvard and the work that they're doing, and the work that Dr. Poulos is doing in terms of trying to train people to do something better with individuals by stepping back and sort of understanding how their history plays into why they are acting the way they are, why they're behaving the way they're behaving, and making the choices that they're making. But I want to finish kind of with a personal, and I really had a hard time, and I don't know I can get through this. I'm a huge product of trauma. This is the way it is. Even being here, thinking about coming here and being here the last 2 days. Number one, I was here 4 years ago. It was so inspiring, just an incredible conference. I left here on fire. Everybody being in the same room talking about what was possible. Here we are 4 years later and how much have we accomplished. Thank God Carlton Reeves is on the sense. She's determined to drive it in a different direction. But I look at other places. I just have to drop this privileged opportunity to go to India about a week ago. It was a week in India, and what they're doing in investing in their people, their kids, their institutions, the fight they're having to bring their education up, everything they're doing, it's like so inspiring. I can't even begin to tell you. But come around and look here. Where's our investment? Where's our investment in education? Where's our investment in people? Why are we not changing? Years ago, people are still suffering, coming out of prison without resources, and the resources are getting squeezed, and there's mental health systems unraveling, and the medical system is unraveling, and what are we doing about it? So the reason I'm having trauma out of this is 4 years ago, I came and I was totally inspired and came back. By the end of September, it was a July conference. By the end of September, I lost my fourth son, second son to suicide. He was just finished his third year of surgical residency. Incredibly caring human being, the pediatric surgeon, gifted surgeon, won every teaching award, won everything. And a spouse was not supportive. We none of us had any idea it was masked. It was hidden. All of us was hidden. Everybody was pretending. Well, I decided, I really debated. I thought I could do this whole thing and not mention this. You know what? I'd be pretending. This work has to be about speaking truth to power and telling the truth, getting people to understand that deep down people have issues and pain and suffering and trauma. And the only way we're going to deal with it is put it out there, talk about it, and figure out how to heal it. So, I say this because I should have been retired at 65. Because my son and I had a plan that we were going to go and do, I grew up working in medicine, that we were going to go do surgeries around the world and help out. And that was my retirement plan, is to go do that with him. He's not here. So I've just sent my notice to be senior judge in June, and I've stayed about 7 years longer to stay committed to this work. But it's really hard work. And so what I told Dr. Moreland, Khalil, I said I desperately needed to hear you, because what she talked about is the secondary trauma, and the trauma to those of us working in the system is very real. Because what I do is fight my trauma the following way, and I want to close with a book, the only book that's ever mattered to me in the survival of the death and loss of people close to me and the trauma in my life, is Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning. And in his book, he talks about why some people survive the Holocaust and why other people don't. And he tries to figure out, what is that about? Why do some people survive? Why do some people come out of prison and thrive? And others just can't put it together? Why, when you see somebody who has the opportunities and you sit there in a sentencing, you think that guy's going to make it and that guy's not? Well, I'll tell you, that's when you know you need to leave the bench, because you never know who's going to make it, and what you have to do is give everybody the best fair chance to do it. But what I learned and had to come to grips with was when they asked him to describe his life, how do you describe what you're doing? And he said, it's very easy. The meaning of my life has to be to help other people find the meaning of theirs. So what I will tell you reentry allows me to do is two things. To be with people who have suffered and who, immeasurable suffering, growing up, little childhood indignations and abuse and neglect, trauma from prison, trauma from coming out, the disrespect they're shown when they're always considered, the first part of the sentence is a formerly incarcerated banker, a formerly incarcerated teacher, and that's, we get to, in life we get to pay our debt to society and then move on. And so what the meaning of his life was to help others people find the meaning of theirs, and what I realized was the best thing I could do to honor my sons was to be able to go to reentry where I had resources, where I could help other people find the meaning of their life. So it has been a reciprocal gift to be able to be part of that community and understand that together, the suffering that we have, we all have it, doesn't matter whether we're on the bench or we're in a position or a teacher, we're all, life is about suffering. But if we do this together to help lift each other up, and we understand that we have these privileged positions and an opportunity to make a difference in a person's life, why wouldn't this be the best work in the world for judges to be doing? It has been a gift and a privilege to be part of reentry. I've done it for 18 years in Eugene, and I've missed exactly 4 sessions in 18 years. And 14 years doing it in Medford, so twice a month. And what I will tell you is there's story after story after story of success. Why is it that we don't measure success stories and have a narrative or a documentary on the success stories? And why is it that we're always using fear and all these other tactics when, frankly, there's so many people out there quietly making a difference? All of you here today, I have treasured relationships out of what we've accomplished, just having sidebar conversations and projects that we're going to take on. Because you had the courage to come here today. And so for all of you who are here, formerly incarcerated, trying to make a difference, it's Viktor Frankl, your survival. The meaning of your life is to help other people find the meaning of theirs. And I predict that all of you will have a better and more fulfilling life than those people looking for gifts and prizes or power and control. And this system can no longer be about that. It has to be about helping everybody come back and live their best self. So I want to close with the last thing. I was raised by a loving family. I didn't really, I never understood a lot of these issues until growing up in a hospital. I watched a little 4-year-old girl die on her 4th birthday after being beaten by her stepfather. I had no idea families existed like that. And so that's haunted me my entire life. More importantly, my father believed, my family, my mother and father both believed that too much is given, you give back. So I'll never forget, and this is about this all the time. My sisters were stellar athletes, but they were, good in sports, and so they were not given the recognition. And so my father helped renovate a gymnasium with a glass backboard and a brand new floor. Did the whole project, organized the project, and I worked side by side in high school with members of the Lifers Club from work in prison. So they let the lifers out, and they came and worked on projects, and they went back. And I remember thinking, what an incredible opportunity to be able to come and do this. And then they went back. And now, if you think about who's let anybody out to do anything anymore, and what we've done is we've created a system that really almost makes it so impossible that can be successful. Really, I'm a Nancy Gertner believer that at some point we have to disrupt enough to start over, build a system that's actually tailored towards success and working. It has to be built on behavioral and neurobiological and ways in which we can change people to make a difference and use education. Because what we're doing now is failing. And at the end of my career, towards the end of it, is the system has to be better than I got here. And it is better, but it is not nearly what it should be. And I would implore people to use passion and urgency and move people to do something different. Because waste of human talent, we can't compete in the world with what we're doing. We can't offer our children an education if all we're going to do is build prisons and get ankle bracelets and hire more people to power and control as opposed to change lives.
Well, Judge Aiken, and thank you for sharing your story, and thank you for sharing how amazing your son was. And I'm pretty sure he was an amazing individual just hearing about him. And Kristy, thank you for your vulnerability in sharing your life experiences. And so, now we're going to open it up for some questions for both judges. Got you. And Kristy. So we're going to try to do like raised hand situation. I'm going to try to call on folks, so we'll try to do stacks of 3. So like as we go. Or someone with the microphone? Okay, so you're going to try to bounce around? Okay, cool. So we're going to try to like answer as many questions as we can. So here's the thing. Question starts with who, what, where, when, why, or how. And I always say this because there's always someone who's just like, with all due respect, I hope I'm not talking to the person who this is actually going to be. I hope you're not in this room. But we don't need a dissertation defense before a question is asked, so to speak, right? We need pointed questions so we can get to the panelists. Just a couple of themes that I've heard, so we can just try to kind of couch the questions, hoping. So, trauma is obviously not a monolith. There are many different ways for a person to have trauma, and so the solutions cannot be a monolith. I've heard that a number of times from both judges. Courts need judges to be trained in what it is that we're talking about. Collaboration with judges and community-based organizations, non-for-profits, other district attorneys, prosecutors, you name it, has to happen. Choices and treatment of options need to be diversified. Again, I think the more, I've heard this from Judge Aiken, the more options available is the more you can incentivize an individual. So those are just some common themes that I heard. Obviously, there were more. I probably missed some. But I hope that helps to kind of couch some of the questions that we're going to be at. So I think someone has a microphone.
Yes.
Okay, so the person with the mic question.
So my question is for Judge Aiken, and I think that we all know that prisons are criminogenic, they create criminals, and they're very traumatic. That being said, whenever you do your work as a district judge and you sentence people to incarceration, how do you deal with the competing interests of trying to reduce trauma in this world, but at the same time, you are required by virtue of your job to sentence people to very traumatizing atmospheres and traumatizing places?
Thank you.
You want me to explain that I have a job that requires me to sentence people to prison, and how does that comport with trauma? And I guess I'm going to go back to my best friend from law school. Met her the first day of law school. A different background, actually, really trauma-informed background. And she wanted to go down to her hometown, and she was going to be a prosecutor. And I didn't have those options. I had to live in my community. My husband taught at the University of Oregon, and so I was in Eugene. There were no jobs. And I ended up getting hired walking down the street 8.5 months pregnant before I had a lawyer who stopped me and said, "What do you want to do when you finish clerking?" And I said, "I'd like to try cases." And he goes, "Do you want to try them for me?" And I said, "Okay." And so that's how I started my career, and I got all the family law cases. So I walked into family law doing that work. So about 5 years later, we were together, and she said, "Aiken, I think we should be judges." And I said, "What? No one's going to put us on the bench. What are you talking about?" She said, "No, aren't you tired of having to argue against somebody to do something? And don't you think we'd make better decisions?" And I said, "Well, yeah, but that doesn't mean anybody's going to let us be judges." She said, "I think we should try to be judges." And so I said, "Okay, go right ahead." And I started and laughed, and lo and behold, a group of friends got together and invited me over for a potluck and said, "I think you should apply to be a judge." And I said, "What?" And so I ended up on the bench. And what I will tell you is there's Hobson's choices. Rock and hard place choices. I thought to myself, these are hard jobs. It's traumatic. Every single time you sentence somebody, I don't know how to explain this. I take every single one of them seriously and individual. Every single one. I think about each one of them. I've done thousands and thousands and thousands. And you try to do the best you can do. And I finally just decided, I think I would rather do this, turn it over to somebody else, and I'll take the responsibility. And I'll look at the holding people accountable and community safety over against motivating, giving people hope. So what I've always talked about in my sentencings is, my sentencings are about accountability, because they've earned the sanction, earned the punishment. That's what we call it. We've earned the accountability. That's what the society has to have, that the boundaries of the accountability. But I never, ever, ever let anybody leave my courtroom without talking about hope, or about talking about what's going to be next for them, or what I expect, or to write me, or to come back, or to come tell me. And I can tell you, I've had people come after long sentences, come back and tell me exactly what I've said to them, and they come back and they're ready to say, okay, now you said you do this, and they hold me accountable, and I do my very best, one at a time, to respond. That somebody has to do the job, and to be honest, you know, as I've set my notice for senior status, and I'm saying this again, I believe this is more than I usually reveal, but I've had a heart issue. Why should I be surprised? I've had a broken heart from who's close to me, but I had a heart issue develop, and my cardiologist said to me, you need less stress and you need more money in your life. And I realized that I have a choice. I have almost 5.5 grandchildren, and I have a lot I want to accomplish. So how do you start to go back and balance? And I know the trauma, because the internal trauma, having been done this now for 35 years. So you know, I'm going to do senior status, and I'm going to contribute differently. I'm passing the baton on. You can take those cases and deal with them and go at it every day. But I'm going to try to work on a bigger arena about trying to talk about this. But at the end of the day, it's, you know, for work. It's a job that gave me a chance to do amazing things one at a time. One person in front of you, one at a time. And I've had people come back, I've had to incarcerate, and they thank me because it saved their life. Otherwise they were going to die in the streets. And I've had people come back and tell me what happened to them, and I've spent as much as I can to get them the services they need to address those traumas. I only wish that we held the prisons more accountable for what's happening inside and what's delivered, and that we had a true insight into what's happening there, because I think we are creating for difficult situations. It's an inadequate answer, but I can tell you, here's how I know the difference. Since I'm not doing criminal sentencings now, the relief I have that I will never send another person to prison or to jail is an enormous lift for somebody else. I can't tell you that. I just want you to know I took every case in front of me one at a time, extremely seriously. Best we could do with the
Thank you, Judge. If we could get the part about holding corrections accountable on the record, thank you. Next question, please.
My name is Emcee Thompson. I'm the program director for From Prison Cells to PhD, and I have my executive director here, Dr. Andrees, with me. This question is for Judge Matthew or Judge Aiken. With trauma being so much of the theme here at the conference, what can we do, minus a civil commitment, to ensure that pre-trial and the pre-sentencing report reflects an accurate, because there should be some type of trauma assessment done to inform the sentencing process. And then it should be done post-release. It seemed like that should be just standard SOP, standard operational procedures. What are your thoughts on that, either Judge, please?
Well, you know, it's funny you should ask that question, because a lot of judges in New York City, but in Brooklyn in particular, where I'm also the administrative judge, get annoyed because it has become standard operating procedure. So there's two institutional indigent defense services in Brooklyn, the Legal Aid Society and Brooklyn Defender Services. And almost without fail, they have a social worker on their staff prepare a pre-pleading memorandum to give to the prosecutor and the judge for a number of reasons. One, either to make them eligible for a diversion program, drug court, mental health court, we have a veterans court, and other just general alternative to incarceration programs where there may not be a specific problem. And I'm going to try to explain this, but there's a county law 18B in New York State which allows private attorneys to represent indigent defendants, and they're paid, in my case, by the city of New York. And that assigned counsel plan is hiring now experts to help those attorneys who maybe are single practitioners, they don't have a staff, who allow them to consult with mental health professionals to do these pre-pleading memorandums, either one, to divert, or two, in mitigation of the sentence. So I would say that it's, at this point, built into the system. And I'm not sure if you know, but I'm lucky enough in New York City that we have so many great programs that my clinical team can make up a treatment plan to send people to, and my only problem is housing. I don't have supportive housing, and that's what keeps people in jail. We don't like to use the shelter system. It's unsafe. You can appreciate if you're on psychotropic medication, it makes you sleepy. You wake up at a shelter, everything you have is gone. So if I had a wish list, that would be on the top of my wish list. But I hope that answers your question.
I would tell you also the ACEs test, the Adverse Child Events test, profound. That work was done years and years ago as profound as when it did the tobacco studies, and we've never operationalized it. We should be doing an ACEs evaluation at pretrial, understand what those issues are, and start working on strategizing those and see if we can make a difference at the end. So that needs to be part of it. And then something I would want to, that we don't, and I guess just simply because I blurted it out, but I did. I put a grief and loss program together when I was the juvenile judge. Probably the best job I ever had was the 2 years I was the juvenile judge. The most incredible educational experience, intellectually challenging, with 1,800 kids you're responsible for, both in dependency and delinquency cases. And I worked with, it's a long story, but one of my dear friends was dying of cancer. She got a grief and loss counselor that was helping her get through this. And through the course of life, we had the Thurston shooting. And so one of the first school shootings was in Oregon, and she came to me, and my husband used to call her my death friend. Death friend's on the phone again. And my death friend wanted me to put grief and loss programs in the juvenile court. And for the trauma, again, back to trauma, and we did. It was the most popular course we had. And what people didn't understand in grief and loss, which is again part of that trauma-informed work, is kids in juvenile, the parents were still fighting over them when they were coming out of treatment. And there were kids in there who were suffering from grief and loss and trauma because their parents were choosing drugs over them. And so the complication of trauma with grief and loss, and taking a look at how people choose to act out or behave when grief and loss happens in their life, is all part of this. And we do not, I can think of times when people do this crazy behavior and they come into court and you start deconstructing what happened, and there's some tragedy in their life that caused them to react in a different way. We need to understand how to get ahead of some of this and how to address some of those issues, build in some safeguards. I just believe we're so embryonic in what we're doing and trying to change this system and build it on principles of behavior change. We're never going to rule or order people to be better people. What we're going to do is lead them to the opportunity to feel better about themselves and their place in the world, and finding meaning, which I hugely believe is important, the why, the meaning, by helping them open doors. And right now we just don't do that, we close doors. So I think Chris started the whole thing off with saying that he never, and this is going to haunt me, that at 15, not one person ever said what he could do. And that's heartbreaking, because every single conversation in a courtroom should start with, what do you do? Over.
Well, thank you, Judge. I said we would end at 2:50. I know we're out of time. I'm so sorry. Okay. Oh, we have one more? Okay.
Just one question. As a psychologist, I absolutely applaud the focus on trauma, and particularly, Judge, for sharing your own experience. In all integrity, I can't sit in the audience and talk about how much I appreciate people talking about their own experience without expressing mine. My husband was the executive director of the Department of Corrections in Colorado, and he was murdered in our home in front of me. And as I sit here, and your comment about corrections doing what they should be doing, it's tough, right? He spent his career in public service, and we're all in this together. It takes prevention, it takes treatment, it takes judges, it takes parole, it takes law enforcement, people, officers on the street, all of us talking about what is happening to our world, what's happening in particular to our young men of color, and pulling together in that. So I just urge the resistance to blaming the other who's not here or who's not sitting here. And in fact, talking about what can we all do? How can we all participate? How can we use our own experience and bring our own voice to the table to make this a different experience for young men and women who end up interacting with the system?
It's frankly why I came here, because the group of people who come here are wanting to collaborate. And I've been in prisons. I go into prisons and I go in and I've worked with every single warden. I had the privilege of bringing my education specialist to talk to all the wardens in the country about what we do with education. And we had this incredible conversation. But as we're not paying attention, we're letting things slip. And the thing is, we have to be hyper vigilant about every part of this system, because if we have a break or a schism or a problem, it skews the whole thing. And right now, I think corrections, given what happened during COVID and during all the stuff that's happening across the board, as people are coming out, it's making it more difficult. So I'm a partner with the prisons that I've gone in, and I care a great deal about working internally. So it's not an us and them, but there's balls getting dropped. And again, we have to be hyper vigilant, and we have to work collaboratively to do it.
Absolutely agree.
Yeah.
Thank you.
One last thing I wanted, another book is, and don't underestimate it, but I'm going to tell you, Dr. Bruce Perry and Oprah Winfrey, do not underestimate the power of Oprah Winfrey and the story of her trauma and what happened to you. And that book is like, if you don't want to read this is more clinical, if you want to read about what trauma does, pick up that book. It is a powerful read, and it will change how you look at the work generally.
That's going to be the name of my TED Talk. Don't underestimate Oprah Winfrey. The power of Oprah Winfrey. But thank you for sharing that. Just want to say that, obviously trauma is not a monolith. Formerly incarcerated people aren't monoliths. Judges aren't monolith. The correctional system is not a monolith at all. So definitely don't want anyone to take any statement that was made about corrections as one entity. We understand that there are like amazing correctional officers in this country who go in every day and do a very hard job for all too often very little pay. They themselves are to some extent serving time. The way that their families are impacted, they themselves are impacted. However, we also know for a fact that there are also very bad correctional institutions and people who are absolutely doing it with negative intentions, and they're doing it very purposefully. So definitely don't want that to get lost, but thank you for sharing. Sorry for your loss. Just want to say one more thing. My dear friend Andre Ward reminded me that if anyone, for any reason, for anything that was said, any experience shared, any word that was said that may have been triggering, we obviously want to support someone seeking consult, seeking help for that. We apologize, but it is a very traumatic experience that we're talking about, the experience of incarceration. And you can see that, again, trauma is not one experience. Judge Aiken shared about her experience. And so it's not one experience. For whatever reason, if something was triggering, please obviously seek consultation. We want that. And I want to thank the panelists. I know Judge Aiken's going to take us out, but I wanted to thank the panelists. Thank you, Judge. Thank you.
Kristy did a fabulous book, a workbook for people to come out and to look at some of these issues. That perfectly flawed how your career works, and I couldn't be prouder of what she's done, and she will call it, so I know.
Thank you, everyone. Two quick announcements. I've been requested by my fellow formerly incarcerated attendees and speakers that they'd like to do a quick photo here, if we can. And we're going to take just about a 5-minute break and then move into the next panel in this room altogether. Thank you.